Corruption by P.K. Armstrong. Chapter 22. The small back room of the bar was used as the owner's office. The fake leather chairs sat across an executive desk that was too large for the room. Receipts, catalogs, and old drinking glasses littered the desk, and clearly it had been a while since the place was cleaned. The minuscule light, filtered by dirty glass panes and cobwebs, streamed in and highlighted the dust floating in the air. The shared ventilation with the bar ensured that the smell of stale beer and bodies penetrated the office. The door burst open on the room, and a man rushed in. His face was pale, and sweat was pouring down the sides at his exertions. "He's dead! Simon Rain is dead!" The two men that were occupying the room seemed unmoved by the revelation, which excited the newcomer even more. "Tell me you didn't have anything to do with this?" "Sit down, Stan," the one called Vernon invited. "I don't want to sit down," Stan yelled. The other man in the room stared at Stan Granger, sighed, and slowly crossed his legs. He said nothing. His clothes were the antithesis of the room in which he sat. His gray pants were creased perfectly, and his bespoke shoes sparkled. His gray dress shirt was still crisp, even though the room was overly warm and stuffy. He had no jewelry save for a signet ring on his pinky finger, and his head had not a hair out of place. He removed imaginary dirt from his pants and waited. Stan stopped pacing, sighed, and sat down heavily in an empty chair. "Where have you been, Stan? We haven't seen you lately." Stan was staring at his hands, but looked up sharply. "I've been around, Sorensen. You know, I still have a job, as do we. But we still make time for friends," Sorensen said silkily. Stan ran his fingers through his hair. Sorensen eyed him with disgust. "When is the last time you showered and changed? You wouldn't be worried about something, would you, Stan?" Stan Granger heard something in Sorensen's voice. "No, no, Sorensen. Like I said, I'm working. A little behind, if I'm honest. I haven't written a report in 2 weeks." Sorensen sighed and shook his head. "Tisk, tisk," he exclaimed slowly. "This is why you will never be more than what you are. Mediocre." Stan cringed at the insult. Andrew Vernon piped up energetically. "Yeah, Stan, you gotta dress the part." "What happened to Simon Rain?" Stan asked tentatively, because he didn't want to make Sorensen angry. "What makes you think we know?" Andrew Vernon asked angrily. "Because you guys said he would have to be dealt with. The next thing I know, he's dead." Stan was beginning to get riled up again. Sorensen laughed. "See what I mean? Mediocre," he said so smoothly it almost sounded melodic. "A good investigator wouldn't jump to that kind of conclusion." He shifted in his chair, switching which leg was draped over the other. "Frankly, knowing Rain, he was probably killed by someone else he was blackmailing." Stan didn't react to Sorensen's slip. He had just admitted that Rain was blackmailing them. "Fine, fine, you're probably right. Rain was into a lot of dirty deals." He decided to deflect. "I wouldn't be surprised if Detective Christopher Roland didn't have something to do with it. He's a cool character. No one would ever suspect." "Don't be an idiot," Vernon retorted. "That guy is too righteous to do something like that." Vernon used the air quotes when he said righteous. "It's really a shame we couldn't use him, really. He's quite good." The room was quiet as each of its occupants thought briefly about Christopher Roland. It was Sorensen who broke the silence. We don't need him." Sorensen knew the relationship between Vernon, Granger, and himself had reached its end. No, they didn't need Detective Christopher Roland, but they could use him. "Stan, go home. Take a shower and get back to work. And do try and act like a good cop for once. Catch up on your reports. I'll let you know when we need you." Stan, confused by the abrupt dismissal, rose from his chair warily, watching Sorensen like a hawk. Sorensen sat in his chair nonchalantly, swinging his leg, looking at his fingernails as if they were the most interesting thing in the world. Stan shrugged, turned, and walked out of the room. Vernon watched the door slam and then turned to look at Sorensen, who had a strange look on his face. Vernon had a thought. Who was involved in the kidnapping? Sorensen always made sure his guys didn't know who had what assignment unless they needed to work in pairs. He sat up in his chair and leaned forward, resting his arms on his legs. He ignored Vernon's question. Granger is weak. We do well to remember that and be careful what we tell him. He got up and moved towards the door. Roland is investigating Simon Rain's death? Yep, Superman is on the case, Vernon said snidely. Well, I better be on my way. Check you later, Sorensen. Sorensen tipped his head in acknowledgement. As Vernon slowly closed the door and it shut with a click, Sorensen rose from his chair. He looked about the room, repulsed by the filth. He nodded his head. Yes, Detective Christopher Roland might prove to be a problem. It's a good thing that he had already put a distraction in motion.